Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Holly. Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, I am Holly. Pleased to meet you. How are you doing? Please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for clicking on this video. Also a big thank you for the 259 subscribers that I have gained. Thank you so much. It means so much to me that you all have subscribed and you're interested in what I've got to say. So without further ado, let's get into this week's True Crime Tuesday video. I've had this plan in my head to start doing like you guys send in your date of birth and I'll find out obviously what happened on that date. So I thought I'd kick it off with my birthday, which is the 21st of December 1988. And this is a pretty big day in history. If you don't know what happened on this day, don't worry, I am about to go through it with you. So a few days leading up to the 21st of December 1988, 243 people were packing their things and getting ready to go home for the holidays to their families. Some of them were going to surprise their families and some of them had planned this trip months ahead so that they could go and see them. Also on the 26th of December 1988, 16 members of crew, including one captain, one first flight officer, one flight engineer, 2 pursers and 11 flight attendants were getting the Pan Am 103 flight ready for takeoff. This plane was also known as Clipper Maiden of the Sea. This was a flight that took place hundreds of times a month. Hundreds. It was a regular flight. And it took off from Frankfurt in Germany, from Frankfurt Airport, and its final destination would be Detroit in Michigan. Unfortunately, on this day, the final destination would not be reached, and this is what happened. So between Frankfurt and London, there were 243 passengers on this flight. Now, it took off from Frankfurt in Germany, landed in London. The next stop would be New York. The passengers on this plane included 35 students from Syracuse University. These students had been on a study abroad kind of program in London, so they boarded the plane ready to go home to see their families. Also on this plane there was a UN commissioner for Namibia. There was an Olympian, a musician, UN officials and US intelligence officials amongst all of the general civilians that were travelling that day as well. So yeah, they got on the plane at Frankfurt and at London. At 6:25, the captain of the aircraft contacts air traffic control and asks for permission to take off, and they clear him. He takes off, no troubles there, no problems. At 6:58 p.m, the first flight officer, so the co-pilot, let's call him a co-pilot, gets in touch with Shanwick Oceanic Area Control. So if you've never heard of Shanwick Oceanic Area Control, it's based in Ireland and it assigns flight corridors to aircrafts so they can have a safe flight, and it basically reduces the risk of collisions while in air. So at 6:58 p.m, the co-pilot gets in touch with them wanting to know which is the best flight corridor for them. He tells them their flight number. He tells them the altitude that they are flying at, which is 31,000 feet at this point. So you can imagine how high up that is, how far up in the sky that is. And he also tells them their flight path, basically where they're heading. So obviously if you're up in a plane, it takes a little while for information and communications to get to each other. There's a bit of a time delay. And at 19:02, the man on the other end of the conversation gets all this information, analyses it, and gets back to the co-pilot saying Clipper 103 should take 59 north, 10 west to Kennedy. So this was at 7:02 at night time. Okay. The man at the air traffic control had no answer from Pan Am 103 flight, and then he was looking at his screens trying to figure out, well, where are they on the map of it? Have they received it and taken the right flight path? But what he saw on his screen would just put terror into him, basically. So a transponder is like a communication device on a plane, and the transponder disappears off of this man's screen, and he's like, what the hell? And it takes a couple of seconds for everything to catch up with itself and what the man saw on his screen when he looked, which is something that I really do imagine that he will never ever forget. This man saw a Boeing 747 jet breaking apart. The cause of this would be later found out to be a Semtech bomb that was put inside of a tape player inside of a suitcase and was loaded onto the plane. The plane was delayed at some point, and it is said that the explosion was supposed to happen overseas, so there would be no evidence. But it didn't happen like that. The explosion took place over a small town in Scotland called Lockerbie, and I'm sure once I say the town's name, most of you would have heard about it. So I'll put a diagram up here just so you know what I'm talking about. You got the nose of the plane in the cockpit where the pilot and everybody sits, and then just after that is the fuselage underneath the plane, okay? So there's that section before you hit the wing. The bomb was in that section underneath, and when it went off, it ripped a hole in the fuselage and it ripped a hole in the shell of the plane. And it is said that the nose of the plane came apart like this from the plane. It opened like a tin can, basically, is what they were saying. Once the plane got to 19,000 feet, it started to nosedive vertically. So it was at 31,000 feet, so it had to fall all the way to 19,000 feet. And it just started to nosedive towards this small town. People closest to the explosion at the front of the plane. So obviously, if you've never been on a plane before, you get on in front of the wings. So the wings are here, and you get on pretty close to the cockpit, basically, where the explosion takes off. And your seats start pretty soon, don't they? So the people closest to the explosion were catapulted out of the plane and into the night sky. Some of these people were sucked into the jet's engines, and well, I don't need to explain to you what happened to those people. It's also reported that as soon as the cabin pressure went, the nose of the plane came off, the grueling conditions of being 31,000 feet in the air immediately knocked people out. Obviously the explosion killed some people to start off with, and those people were thrown out of the plane and whatnot. They've gone dead. The other people obviously were still in the plane. Ice began to form on the windows on the inside because it was freezing cold. The altitude, obviously 31,000 feet in the air, knocked people out. It was said that the conditions were similar to the peak of Mount Everest, so you get my picture. It's also reported that 60% of people were still alive right up until the impact of the plane hitting the floor. Nobody knows if any of these people woke up from being unconscious. I will never find out, unfortunately. Part of me wants to think, well, let's just hope that they were unconscious, because you'd hate to think about that suffering, wouldn't you, really? So as I've already said, this plane, Clipper Maiden of the Sea, crashed down in Lockerbie in Scotland. Now, not only were 270 people killed on the plane, all 270 passengers and crew were killed, but also on the ground 11 people lost their lives from the impact of flying debris from the plane. They were killed instantly from things falling out of the plane. Eyewitnesses who lived in the town noted that bodies were falling out of the sky and just landing everywhere. Jet engines were still turning on the ground. Wings took houses out. The kerosene set fire to people's houses. And I also read, which is really sad, 4 days before Christmas, this boy went to his friend's house. Okay, left 3 members of his family, including his mother and his sister, went to his friend's house not long before this all happened, and he went to check on his sister's Christmas present. He'd saved all his money up for this nice bike for his sister. And when he got back to his house, his entire family had been wiped out. So obviously immediately this is massive. 270 people killed. So immediately the police were called. Dumfries and Galloway Constabulary, one of the smallest, if not the smallest, police forces in the world, had now got to deal with this massive act of terrorism. So they called the army in. Hundreds of people ascended onto this massive crime scene, basically, because that's what it is. The FBI were also called as well. So when the plane exploded, obviously 31,000 feet in the air, the debris spread over a 2,000 kilometre radius. And over the next however long, the police and the army and the crime scene investigators and all those good people collected over 4 million pieces of the wreckage and over 10,000 pieces of debris from the plane. Like debris being clothes and things in suitcases and stuff, little pieces of the... So you can already imagine how big this thing was. It's not like the plane just fell out of the sky in a whole piece. There was an actual scavenger hunt to find people. There was a scavenger hunt to find pieces of the plane, the scavenger hunt to find the black box of the plane. So it was huge, absolutely huge. It shook the world, okay? Up until 9/11, this attack was classed as the biggest terrorist attack seen so far in the, well, obviously in the UK and America. It just shook the world. So they'd got all their evidence, they'd got all the pieces of the plane that they could possibly find, and they built this fuselage back up out of the pieces of the plane that they'd got. And they could see actually from this where the plane had exploded, and also they combed through all of the debris just to try and figure out what the hell had happened, what went so wrong, who did this, was it a fault with the plane, what had happened? Because at this point they didn't know. They thought, well, this can't be, surely somebody can't have done this, this is a bit mean, right? So they needed to find out, and they needed to find out fast. So like I mentioned earlier, in the end it was discovered that a bomb had been constructed and it had been put inside of a tape player, pretty much like this one here. And it was hidden inside of a suitcase. It was a Semtex bomb. Now, Semtex is odorless, kind of explosive thing. It's quite hard to detect without specialist equipment, apparently. So I've read 2 different stories from numerous websites that the bomb was fitted with like an altimeter so that the bomb would go off at a certain altitude. But then somewhere else I read that it was a timer and the bomb would go off at a timer, which the timer thing would make more sense to me because the plane was running late and the bomb exploded over Lockerbie when it was supposed to explode over the sea. So the timer one would make more sense. Unsure. Not 100% sure on that one, so if you do know, let me know in the comments. It'd be interesting to know. So it would take 3 whole years for the police and the FBI, which is understandable, it was huge, okay, for them to figure out, well, it's got to have been these men. And in those 3 years they managed to get 15,000 witness statements. Oof. And those witness statements and all of the evidence that they had collected led to murder indictments for 2 men. And I'm sorry if I say these names wrong, don't at me guys. The first man was Abdel Basit Megrahi. The second guy was Lamin Khalifa Fima. And both of these men were said to have been acting upon the orders of the infamous Colonel Gaddafi. While Colonel Gaddafi never admitted that he had ordered this attack to take place, he and his government took responsibility for it, basically. And Colonel Gaddafi ended up paying over £2 billion to the victims of this horrendous attack, but he would not give these two men up to start with. It took some threats from the UN, etc., for him to finally give these two men up to be tried and tested. And it didn't happen straight away that he would give these men up. It took 8 years for him to actually say, yeah, all right, you can have these men. So in 1999, Abdel Basit and Larbin Khalifa were given up to the authorities and extradited, questioned in the Netherlands, and they were tried and tested both in Scotland, I do believe. Don't hold me to that. Not 100% sure on that one. They say that it was a attack to get revenge on the US for bombing some kind of Libyan thing, because Colonel Gaddafi, if you didn't know, Colonel Gaddafi was the leader in Libya. So the US had bombed somewhere, and it is said that this was a retaliation. There are many conspiracy theories spanning from this one attack. One of them was it was aimed at the US intelligence officers on board the plane. One of them said that the government already knew that this was going to happen, and some big official had taken from a different flight, had taken an earlier flight because he knew about this threat and he was warned about it. So, and the plane before doing the same route had meticulous searches and investigations on it to check for bombs and stuff, but this one seemed to have not been done. We don't know when the bomb was put on the plane. We just don't know. There's a lot of things that people just still don't know, because obviously the people responsible always claim that they were innocent. So Lamin Khalifa Fima was tried and tested, and he was found not guilty for the murder of 270 people, and he was acquitted basically, so he could return home, an innocent man. And Abdel Basit Megrahi was finally sentenced on the 31st of January in 2001 to life imprisonment. But he was later released on compassionate leave because he was diagnosed with terminal prostate cancer. Apparently there was a big argument about this between the UK government and the US government, saying it shouldn't have happened. I agree, it should not have happened. He should have died in prison. I read somewhere as well that he was only really sentenced to 27 years in prison. So in August 2009, Abdel was released from prison, serving only 8.5 years in prison. He returned to his hometown in Tripoli, and he passed away on the 20th of May 2012, a free man at peace. Do you agree with this, or do you not? There's no right and wrong answer. I don't want any arguments down in the comments. So yes, that act of terrorism was huge, and until the 9/11 bombings, it was known as the biggest terror case that the UK and the US had ever seen. It was also known as the biggest investigation by the smallest police force in the world. Can you just imagine all those people? There's pictures of people in the airport going to meet their son's daughter's husband's wife off the plane, and them hearing about this incident. And one eyewitness actually described the screams of the mothers when they heard about it. And the sad thing is, as much as they investigated it, as much as they got witness signatures and witness testimonies and all this, nobody's actually certain what actually really happened that day. Obviously, yes, we know there was a bomb on the plane. Did Colonel Gaddafi order it? Was Lamin Khalifa Fima involved with it? And should he have gone to jail instead of going as a free man and living his life to the fullest? I don't think we'll ever know. If you do ever visit Lockerbie, there is actually a massive memorial for this. It is an extremely small town. The population of the town is not a lot. I think it's one of those towns where generations of families are. You've got the old generation, you've got the middle generation, You've got whole lines of families in Lockerbie, and this happened and possibly wiped out some lines of that family, like the mother and daughter that got killed. And I believe that the grandmother lived with them as well. I'm not 100% sure, but I think she did. So that's 3 generations of one family just gone. It's very, very sad when these things, it's very sad when anybody gets killed, but it's so sad that somebody would do this to innocent people without really a reason, or even if they had a reason, it was a reason that was political. It wasn't a reason to kill these people. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. I'm sorry that we are in here. I fancied a bit of a change. I need a new desk chair, basically, and that one's made out of wood in the office, and it's not that comfortable. So I thought I'd sit on my bed and tell you this true crime and have a chat with you. So yeah, but that's it from me this week. If you want to send me your birthday, I will leave contact info down below. I might end up making it like so that I do 2 true crime videos a week. Might call it what shook the world on your birthday. Send me your birthdays, guys. You can put them in the comments below and I shall get to it and make some videos. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, leave a nice comment, leave me your birthdays down below. I shall see you all later. Toodles. Bye.